My name is Elliot Callan. I'm 45 years old and I'm an architect. 7 years ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I had built my own successful firm from scratch, designing everything from boutique hotels in Santa Monica to luxury condos in downtown Seattle. But none of that mattered to my wife's family. You see, I married into the Whitmores of Connecticut. Old money, the kind of family that traces their lineage back to the Mayflower and owns half of Greenwich. Charlotte Whitmore was beautiful, sophisticated, everything I thought I wanted. But her family, they never let me forget that I was the kid from Masonville, Indiana, population 3,200, whose dad worked at the General Motors plant and whose mom cleaned houses to make ends meet. For 3.5 years, I endured their subtle digs at family gatherings, comments about my charming Midwestern accent, or how refreshing it was to have someone who actually worked for their money. I bit my tongue because I loved Charlotte, and I thought she loved me enough to stand up for me. I was wrong. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving dinner at the Whitmore estate in Greenwich. Picture this. A dining room that could seat the entire Supreme Court, with a table set with china that probably cost more than most people's cars. Charlotte's mother, Patricia, was holding court as usual, discussing the family's latest charitable donations to Yale and their winter plans in Aspen. I was quietly eating my turkey when Charlotte's cousin Bradley started talking about some mutual fund his hedge fund was launching. "Of course," he said. "You need at least $5 million to get in." But Elliot wouldn't understand these kinds of investments, would you, Elliot? You're more of a hands-on worker. The table went quiet. I looked at Charlotte, waiting for her to say something. Anything. Instead, she smiled and said the words that ended our marriage. "Oh, Bradley's right. Elliot's more comfortable with blueprints than balance sheets. He's so wonderfully blue-collar. It's almost quaint, really." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it cut deeper than any shout could have. 23 people around that table, and every single one of them was looking at me like I was some kind of curiosity, a pet they kept around for entertainment. I didn't explode. I didn't throw my napkin down or storm out dramatically. I simply stood up, walked to the coat closet, put on my jacket, and left. Charlotte called after me, but I didn't turn around. I drove my Honda Civic. Yes, they made fun of that too. Straight home, packed my clothes, and by Monday morning, I was on a plane to Portland, Oregon. I never went back. Portland became my sanctuary. I rented a small apartment in the Pearl District and threw myself into work like never before. The Pacific Northwest was booming, and sustainable architecture was the future. While the Whitmores were busy playing golf at their country clubs, I was designing LEED-certified office buildings and eco-friendly residential complexes that were winning national awards. Within 2 years, my firm, Callan Design Group, had grown from just me working out of a WeWork space to a team of 15 architects and designers. We were featured in Architectural Digest twice, and I was invited to speak at the American Institute of Architects National Convention in Chicago. The same hands that Charlotte called blue-collar were creating buildings that were changing skylines across the West Coast. I never called Charlotte, never answered her texts. My lawyer handled the divorce paperwork, and I signed the papers without asking for a single dollar of her family's money. I didn't want their inheritance or their summer house in the Hamptons. I wanted to build something that was completely mine. By my 5th year in Portland, Callan Design Group had offices in Seattle, San Francisco, and Denver. We were grossing $8 million annually, and I was personally worth more than most of the trust fund babies at that Thanksgiving table. But success wasn't about the money. It was about proving to myself that I didn't need their validation to matter. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning in March, 7 years after I'd walked out of that Thanksgiving dinner, my assistant buzzed my intercom. "Mr. Callan, there's a Charlotte Whitmore on line 1. She says it's urgent." My finger hovered over the button for a long moment. 7 years of silence, and now she was calling. I picked up. "Elliot." Her voice was different, strained. I need to see you." It's about Connor. Connor was the son she'd had with James Hartford, some Wall Street executive she'd married 18 months after our divorce was finalized. I'd seen the wedding announcement in the New York Times social pages. Couldn't help myself from looking. "What about him?" I asked. "He's sick, very sick. He has acute lymphoblastic leukemia and—" Her voice cracked. "The doctors say he needs a bone marrow transplant. We've been searching for a donor for 6 months through the National Marrow Donor Program, but there's no match." I felt sorry for the kid, but I didn't understand why she was calling me. "Charlotte, I'm not sure how I can help." "You can help because you're his father." The words hit me like a freight train. I nearly dropped the phone. "What did you say?" "Connor is your son, Elliot, not James's, yours. I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks after you left that night. I was already 8 weeks along. We'd been having problems, remember? I wasn't sure at first, but I ran the numbers, checked the dates. He's yours." The room started spinning. I sat down heavily in my chair, staring out at the Portland skyline I'd helped shape. "You're lying." "I'm not lying. I have the paternity test results. I had them done when Connor was 3, just to be sure. Elliot, please. He's 12 years old and he's dying. You're B-positive blood type with HLA markers that make you a potential match. The doctors want to test you. You kept this from me for 13 years? My voice was steadier than I felt. I thought it would be easier. For everyone. James accepted Connor as his own and you were gone, and my family— Your family. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Right, because having a blue-collar father wouldn't look good in the social pages. She was crying now. "Elliot, please. I know I hurt you. I know what I did was unforgivable. But Connor is innocent in all this. He's just a little boy who needs his father to save his life." I hung up without another word. But that night, lying in my king-size bed in my downtown penthouse, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Somewhere in Connecticut, there was a 13-year-old boy, my son, fighting for his life. A boy I'd never met because his mother decided I wasn't good enough to be in his world. The next morning, I called my lawyer. My lawyer, David Chen, was a Harvard Law graduate who'd helped me navigate the complexities of building a multi-million-dollar business. When I told him about Charlotte's call, he leaned back in his leather chair and whistled low. "Elliot, this changes everything. If Connor is your biological son, you have parental rights that have been violated for 13 years. We could pursue damages, custody arrangements. I don't want their money, David, but I do want something else." 3 days later, I was on a red-eye flight to Hartford, Connecticut. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was flying first class on American Airlines, wearing a custom-tailored Tom Ford suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The scared kid from Masonville was returning as someone the Whitmores couldn't dismiss. Charlotte met me at Hartford Hospital. She looked older, worn down by worry and sleepless nights. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly as we walked through the sterile corridors toward the pediatric oncology wing. "I'm not here for you, Charlotte. I'm here for Connor." The boy was sleeping when we entered his room. He was small for 13, pale from chemotherapy, but I could see myself in his features. The stubborn set of his jaw was pure Callan. So were his long fingers. Architect's hands, my grandmother used to call them. "The doctors want to run preliminary tests today," Charlotte said. "If you're a match, they can schedule the transplant within a week." I nodded, still staring at my son. "Before I agree to anything, we need to discuss terms." Her eyebrows shot up. "Terms? Elliot, this is your son's life we're talking about." "Exactly. My son. The son you kept from me for 12 years while you played happy family with James Hartford." I turned to face her fully. "I'll submit to the testing, and if I'm a match, I'll donate my bone marrow. But I have conditions." We moved to the family consultation room, where David was waiting with a briefcase full of documents. Charlotte's own attorney, some silver-haired wasp from a white shoe firm, sat across from us looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "First condition," I began, "full paternity acknowledgement and legal recognition. Connor's birth certificate gets amended to show me as his biological father. No more lies, no more cover-ups." Charlotte's lawyer started to object, but she waved him off. Agreed. Second, I want established visitation rights once Connor recovers. Every other weekend, alternating holidays, and 6 weeks during summer vacation. I'm not asking for primary custody yet, but I want to be part of his life going forward. Elliot, my family. Your family humiliated me and then cost me 13 years with my son. They don't get a vote. My voice remained level, but the steel underneath was unmistakable. Third condition, Connor gets to choose whether he wants to know about our relationship. If he wants to meet me as his father, you don't interfere. If he needs time to process, that's his choice too. The lawyer was scribbling furiously. Charlotte just stared at me. Fourth, I continued, I want acknowledgement of what was done. A written statement from you and your family acknowledging that keeping Connor from me was wrong, and that you understand why I'm requiring these legal protections now. Elliot, my mother will never. Then we have a problem. I stood up. Those are my terms, Charlotte. You kept my son from me for 13 years. Now you need my help. I'm willing to save his life, but not on your family's terms anymore. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Charlotte's attorney whispered urgently in her ear, but she wasn't listening. She was looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time. You've changed, she said finally. No, I haven't. This is who I always was. You just never bothered to look past your family's prejudices to see it. She signed the agreements that afternoon. The medical tests confirmed what we all suspected. I was a perfect match for Connor's bone marrow type. The transplant was scheduled for the following Thursday. During the week of preparation, I stayed at the Marriott in downtown Hartford, reviewing architectural plans during the day and visiting Connor in the evenings. He was smart, curious about everything. When he learned I was an architect, his eyes lit up despite his exhaustion. Do you really design skyscrapers? He asked during one visit. Some of them. Mostly I design buildings that help people and don't hurt the environment. Would you like to see some pictures? I showed him photos of the solar-powered community center in Portland, the apartment complex in Seattle that harvested rainwater for irrigation, the office building in Denver that produced more energy than it consumed. He studied each image with the intensity of someone much older. Mom never told me much about my real dad, he said quietly. Just that he lived far away and couldn't visit. I chose my words carefully. Sometimes adults make decisions they think are best at the time. They're not always right. The day before the transplant, Patricia Whitmore finally showed up. Charlotte's mother swept into Connor's hospital room like she owned the place, wearing a Chanel suit and enough jewelry to fund a small nonprofit. She barely acknowledged me at first, focusing entirely on Connor. How are you feeling, darling? Grandmother brought you some books from that lovely shop in Greenwich. Then she turned to me with the same look she'd given me at that Thanksgiving dinner 7 years ago. I suppose you expect some sort of gratitude. I don't expect anything from you, Mrs. Whitmore, but your daughter signed legal agreements that include certain acknowledgments about how this situation was handled. Her face went pale as she realized what that meant. The legal documents made it clear that the Whitmore family bore responsibility for keeping Connor from his biological father for 13 years. It wasn't a public apology, but it was a legal admission that would matter in any future custody proceedings. You calculating son of a grandmother, Connor said weakly from his bed. He's helping me get better. Patricia Whitmore looked at her grandson, then at me, then back at Connor. For the first time in all the years I'd known her, she had nothing to say. The bone marrow transplant went flawlessly. The extraction procedure was done on an outpatient basis. I went home the same day with some soreness and instructions to take it easy for a week. Connor's procedure was more complex, but within 48 hours, his new immune system was already showing signs of accepting my bone marrow. During Connor's 2-week hospital stay for monitoring, I visited every day. The doctors were optimistic. My marrow was integrating well, and his white blood cell counts were improving steadily. During those long hospital hours, Connor and I talked about everything. He told me about his love for Lego architecture sets, his struggles with advanced math, and his dream of maybe becoming a builder like me someday. I told him about growing up in Indiana, about my first drafting table, and about the satisfaction of seeing something you designed rise from empty ground into the sky. "Why didn't you visit me before?" he asked one afternoon during his second week of recovery. I looked at Charlotte, who was pretending to read a magazine in the corner. "Because I didn't know you existed, Connor. Your mother thought it was better if I didn't know about you." He processed this with the seriousness of someone much older than 13. "That seems unfair, to both of us." "Yes," I said. "It was." 2 weeks later, Connor was discharged with a clean bill of health. The transplant had worked perfectly, and his cancer was in complete remission. As I prepared to return to Portland, Connor surprised me. "Dad?" It was the first time he'd called me that. "Can I come visit you sometime? Mom said you live near the mountains." Charlotte stiffened, but she'd signed legal documents. She couldn't say no. "I'd like that very much, Connor. Maybe this summer?" 3 months later, Connor spent 6 weeks with me in Portland. I showed him the city from the observation deck of one of my buildings, took him hiking in the Columbia River Gorge, and taught him how to read architectural blueprints. He had a natural eye for spatial relationships and design proportions. One evening, as we sat on my penthouse balcony watching the sunset over Mount Hood, Connor said something that made everything worthwhile. "I used to be embarrassed that I was different from Mom's family. I don't like golf or yacht clubs or those fancy parties. But now I know why. I'm like you instead." "What do you mean?" "I like building things, creating things, making something useful instead of just existing because of money someone else earned." A year and a half later, Charlotte called to tell me that Connor had announced to his prep school classmates that his real father was a famous architect. James Hartford, who'd legally adopted Connor years earlier, was reportedly furious. The Whitmore family was mortified by Connor's newfound pride in his blue-collar heritage. "He's becoming impossible to manage," Charlotte complained during one of our monthly co-parenting calls. He told his grandmother that her charity galas were performative wealth signaling, and that he'd rather spend his trust fund on sustainable housing projects. I smiled. "Sounds like a smart kid." "This is your influence, Elliot. You're poisoning him against his family." "I'm not poisoning him against anything, Charlotte. I'm just showing him that there are different ways to live, different things to value. He gets to choose what kind of person he wants to be." 2 years later, Connor chose to spend Christmas with me instead of attending the traditional Whitmore holiday gathering in Greenwich. Charlotte was devastated, but Connor was firm in his decision. "They still talk about you like you're some kind of servant, Dad," he told me as we decorated my Christmas tree with ornaments he'd made in woodshop class. "Grandfather said you were a regrettable phase in Mom's life, but you saved my life. You're successful and smart and kind, and they just can't stand that someone they looked down on turned out to be better than them." By Connor's 16th birthday, the transformation was complete. He'd grown tall and confident, with calloused hands from the summer construction job I'd helped him get with one of my contractors. He spoke fluent Spanish from working alongside immigrant crews, understood structural engineering principles, and had already been accepted to MIT's early admission architecture program. The Whitmore family's worst nightmare had come true. Their heir apparent had chosen to follow in the footsteps of the man they'd tried to erase. Charlotte called me one last time, 4 years after the transplant. "I know you hate me," she said without preamble. "I don't hate you, Charlotte. Hate is exhausting and I don't have time for it. Connor barely speaks to me anymore. When he does, it's about buildings or sustainable design or some project you two are working on. I've lost my son." "No," I said gently. "You just never really knew who he was. You wanted him to be a Whitmore, but he was always a Callan. The only difference is now he knows it too." She hung up without saying goodbye. Last month, Connor graduated valedictorian from his high school. His speech was about the importance of building things that matter, creating rather than consuming, and choosing your own definition of success. The Whitmore family sat in stony silence while he thanked his real father for teaching him that worth isn't measured by what you inherit, but by what you contribute. That night, over dinner at our favorite restaurant in Portland, Connor raised his glass of sparkling cider in a toast. To my dad, who showed me that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be. Looking back now, I realize the Whitmores did me a favor that Thanksgiving night 7 years ago. Their cruelty freed me to become who I was meant to be, and their prejudice cost them the chance to know an amazing kid who shares their blood, but none of their values. Connor starts at MIT this fall, with plans to specialize in sustainable urban planning. He wants to design affordable housing that doesn't look cheap and public buildings that inspire rather than intimidate. Last week, he asked if he could intern at my firm next summer. The scared kid from Masonville, Indiana, is finally exactly where he belongs, building a future with his son, one blueprint at a time. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.